What's up, everybody? I'm Billy Ryan, and you are listening to the No One Is Watching podcast, where we explore leadership, culture, and the impact they have on high-performing teams. We can all admire the championships that are won on the field and the big profits that show up on the balance sheet. But this show is dedicated to the premise that those battles are won long before they start. Through conversations with elite performers and leaders in the world of business, sports, and life in general, we'll learn valuable lessons on how you can optimize yourself and your organization. Today we're joined by Detroit Tigers legend and Baseball Hall of Famer Alan Trammell. We discuss Tram's 47 years in professional baseball, from the steep learning curve he faced as a 19-year-old in the big leagues to the wisdom and guidance he currently offers to young players. Tram talks about the role of discipline in his formative years, the many lessons he learned from his mentor, Sparky Anderson, and the joy and gratitude he brings into each day. Look, Tram, it's awesome to see you. I know it's been a few years, and I appreciate you taking the time. Look forward to catching up.
Well, it has been a few years, Billy. It's been too long, and going back to our relationship, and the first person I think of is Kevin Towers, and you know what, he is missed. What a great friend to both of us and others, and great baseball man. But I know we've got some things to talk about. Go ahead. I'm here and anxiously waiting.
Yeah, no, look, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention KT, and I look back on it now, and I'm forever grateful to him for the opportunity he gave me. But looking back on it, and you're still obviously heavily involved in the game, but looking back on it now, it almost feels like generations ago, with the way that our group operated and sort of the dynamic, and I've on a couple of conversations I've referenced the coaching staff that you were a part of, and I need to keep referencing that because it's going to get repetitive, but it was just, there were a lot of sort of unique factors there with KT's approach to leadership and his way with people and his experience. And that's obviously not it's pretty uncommon these days, or uncommon for a group to operate the way that we did. And I am forever grateful for not just for him and his leadership and mentorship, but for the opportunity presented to meet you and others, and we had some fun.
Well, that we did, and KT, as I mentioned, is a special person. Very bright baseball. Obviously, he was a player first, so I think he had that on his side right from the get-go, from a player's perspective. But obviously, when you get on the management side and you're the general manager, things are different. But he had a unique personality. He basically got along with everybody. And the quality people in any walks of life have the ability to talk with the president or talk to somebody that you would perceive as maybe not so special. And that's a unique quality. Not everybody has that gift. But getting back to the baseball part, he knew baseball. He delegated the authority to his staff, his coaching staff, and the people that needed to do their jobs. But he oversaw it. He was obviously the captain of the ship. But I look back, I obviously played for the Tigers, and I'm kind of now in a full circle and back. But in between, I did a few things. And one of the stops was in San Diego, which is home for me. And KT and Bruce Bochy, who was the manager at that particular time, I felt so good about that time of my life, because my kids were here in San Diego going to school. My boys were in high school, and I got a chance for the 3 years that I was coaching there to be at home at least a little bit during a baseball season, and to see them graduate, but also work for my hometown team. Again, I played for the Tigers my entire career, but I was a first-generation Padre fan growing up here in San Diego. And in '69, when the Padres came into existence, I was 11 years old. So if you think back to your youth, at that age, I was chomping at the bit. Major League Baseball. We had AAA baseball, which is fine, but not Major League Baseball. So in '69, when the Padres came in, that's kind of how, the dream had already kind of started for me about maybe becoming a Major League player. I mean, that was my goal, my dream. Ended up getting to do it. But again, getting back to the Padres and the KT, I got a chance to work for Kevin and for Bruce Bochy. And I'll tell you what, that was 3 excellent years for me. That there was obviously learning from Boch and from KT. And I got a chance to work with KT again with Gibby in Arizona, years later. So You know what? Those were excellent 4 years in Arizona. So got a chance to be with KT for 7, and I cherish those times.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, his background within the game is one thing. His ability to just relate
Right.
and disarm people. He was the king of the dive bar. You mentioned any outpost across the country in minor league baseball, or even tangentially involved in baseball. He knew the bartender at the roadside shack. He just had a way about him that endeared him to a lot of people, and not just in baseball, but in life in general.
Yeah.
You talk about legacies and what you leave behind. Obviously, he left a pretty big one, and grateful for the time that we all had together. Certainly.
Yeah. Well, he was
Um,
the gunslinger. That was his handle. And it's appropriate because, like you mentioned, about all walks of life, he could relate to people. And again, going back to, as I mentioned, about him being a player first, he was a pitcher and it's with the Tigers, and then hurt his arm like so many of them. Got into now the other side of baseball, but his really, again, one of the areas that he was so good at is he loved the scouts. And I know, and we're probably going to get into this and the analytics. And I'm not trying to tell you the analytics aren't important. They are. I just think it's the combination that's the key. But the scouts and being able to watch and see them with your own eyes, I stand by that as well. I think again the combination is what you need, and I think that's where you're going to be most successful. But KT had the scouts back, and he really believed in that. And things have changed to a certain degree with the analytics and all. Um, but the game's still very much the same in a lot of areas. You still got to cross home plate more than the other team. You still got to pitch. You still got to get guys out. You still got to play defense. And I think just because of the exposure again with social media and with the TV coverage and things, things are brought to people's attention a lot more. Not just in baseball, but in all sports and all walks of life. And that's just a different generation. Did I like it better back in my day? Probably, but we all revert back to that. The game is still great. Don't get me wrong. There are so many great players and so many good kids still. And don't get me wrong, there are. And I get a chance to work and talk to some of these young guys. That kind of keeps me going. I mean, I'm getting older. I'm not sure how many more years I want to continue to do this, but at least I want to do it for a while. And again, those young players keep me young.
Well, you know what? That you have always struck me as someone who has just this childlike joy around the game, and it's contagious. It really is. I mean, you obviously
Yeah.
had an incredible career as a player. You did things after the game, being a manager and a coach at the big league level, and you're so passionate about it. It's so obvious that you're passionate about it. And I just every day I would show up, you'd have a smile on your face. You'd usually be drenched in sweat because you'd already got like your 2 hour workout in and you were ready to roll. And I always appreciated that you were very appreciative of your lot in life, where you were, what you got to do every day. That was never, it just felt like hey, this is a blessing to be here and I'm going to appreciate it. And I'm going to enjoy it. And that was a rarity. I mean, it stood out to me, and I can tell you still have it, right? You're still working with kids with the Tigers, and they're incredibly fortunate to have you.
Well, I appreciate that, Billy. I really do. But I think, when I think back, you know, when you're younger and then you're getting into the playing part and even first getting into the coaching, managing side and all, um, I've had a lot more time, as we all do, to reflect. And some of the things that I now know, I can think back and appreciate. Again, things that comment that you just made. Passion, you know what? That's something that I know that it's just been with me from day one. But I got to start again with my parents and how I was raised, and did I like a lot of the things that the things that putting my foot down on me with myself and my sisters. Then when I got into professional baseball, we'll get into Sparky and all, and that was basically an extension of my parents. That was kind of the time. I don't. I know I didn't appreciate it. I did what I was told, but I said, I was always like, yeah, I'm not sure if I fully agree, but I did what I was told for the most part. And I look back and I'm thankful that I did because there was a reason that, first of all, my parents, there was some discipline, which I still believe today that is very important. And it doesn't have to be quite like it was back in those days, or our teachers. It was just again, the generation that we were in. But I really believe, thinking back, that it was helpful for me. So again, thinking back to how I was born and I was just kind of created, that I had a little more energy and maybe a little more passion for sports than most. I didn't realize that again back then, but I do realize it now, that I'm probably not normal. My wife, I'm anal in a lot of ways, but in that way, it's good because, again, the discipline and structure that you need, and not just to be a professional baseball player or an athlete, but in really any walk of life. I truly believe that you need some of that in everything if you're going to be successful. And so, again, it starts with the parents, and then as I got in with the teachers, and I shook my head, and I didn't like a lot of the things that, again, were being told, or just I didn't like it. But I do know now that there was a reason, there was a method to his madness. I use that for Sparky. It's like, man, he knew what he was doing when he was so hard on us initially, because we needed it. And I want to say that it works today. It might not be exactly the same style, but I stand by that if you're going to be successful, you need some of that in your life.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's definitely culturally, it's definitely changed. The dynamics changed from parenting to school to pro sports to you name it. But yeah, I mean, look, you're young, you don't know any better. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way. If you're fortunate enough to be surrounded by the right people in the right environment, you can look back and say, they did have my best interest at heart. That was something I always said, just to minor league players, right? Was because how would they possibly know how big of an operation it was? How many people genuinely were there and living and dying for their success? The lady who's 65 years old and works in the admin office, who's processing your checks or is coordinating your travel, she doesn't get a bonus if you make the AA All-Star team, but she's thrilled. She's so excited and she's happy to help. And there's an easy narrative, whether it's an agent or another team or, a player who's not, maybe playing as much as they want. There's an easy narrative. The club's out to get you and this and that. And, look, there's exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, you have people that are there for you to help you. And if you can embrace that, or at least have the wherewithal to say, maybe I need to lean in on this a little bit, or at least, like it sounds like you did, just begrudgingly accept it and listen and do what you're told. Yes. You can be okay.
That is true. And again, Billy, you made a great point. And because you do have a baseball background, you know some of those things. But for some of the young kids and just people that in general that are curious to kind of know what goes on behind the scenes, you hit it. And wow, we need to touch on this a little bit more because, as you mentioned, not everybody's going to be on the field. But an operation or a business, there's so many people that are part of this. And you don't realize how many people, like you said, the secretaries upstairs or some of the administrative people that live and die with you. They're not down there again on the field like, I got a chance to do for so many years and others, but they truly do care. And your success, they might smile, and that's the reward for them. And when on the other side, when you fail and you don't do well, or you go through these little, the ups and downs of baseball, which is going to happen with everybody, they feel it as well. And I just want people to understand that there are a lot of people that do care about the people, the younger kids that are coming up, and unfortunately, let's be honest, the reality is that most people aren't going to make it. But that doesn't mean you can't try. And I'm not trying to tell you that, don't, lose that dream. No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying the facts of life that, even though if you sign professionally, whether it be because of injury, which obviously happens, especially if you're a pitcher, or just lack of performance, I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It's not. It's not supposed to be easy. And to be successful, at the highest level, you've got to be pretty good, but you also have to do some of the other things. But again, going back to your comment and your point about people behind the scenes that care. And that is so important. And I just want people to know because they live and die. I don't care if you're with the Padres, the Tigers, the Yankees, the Dodgers. It doesn't matter. There's people behind the scenes that really they live and die with you. And I just want people to understand. Some people probably know, but not a lot or not enough people really know that. And I think for you to point that out, and again, it kind of just got my mind thinking about, I'd like to give them some of the credit because it's a team. Again, I'm a team guy, and again, that's going to go back to the Sparky thing. Is that you know what a team is much more than just the individual. Obviously, we all have to do certain things and numbers and all like that, but it's all about the team. If you win and you're successful, Sparky used to always say that you'll be surprised at the end of the day, or end of the year, that you'll probably have a pretty good year. And I also believed in that, Sparky. There's a lot of things that Sparky taught me that I'm still teaching today.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, everybody's got so much on their plate on the field and off that it's easy to lose sight of that. How many people are sort of pulling in the same direction. I remember when I was in Arizona, it was down in it was probably lunchtime. Players just starting to trickle in, and we had Joe Saunders, left-handed pitcher on our team, and Joe was the first guy in. I think he may have been starting that night. I'm not sure, but he came in, and I was just getting a cup of coffee, and he said, he's like, "Hey man, what time do you get in?" We had a night game the night before, and I'm like usually between 9 and 9:30, and he's like, "In the morning?" And I'm like, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on before you guys show up and like strap it on at 7:05, and it just kind of, the light went off. I'm like, you know what? Like, why would they know? Similar to the minor leaguers, why would they know how much goes on? But that's the product, right? None of us feel this way when it's going on, but at the end of the day, it's an entertainment business, right? And people are spending their money to come watch you play. And it's passionate and it does a lot of other things, but ultimately it's entertainment. And there's a lot of things that go into that operation, but that always sort of stuck with me. I'm like, you always meet those players, right? Every now and then they stand out, the ones that really understand it and get it and understand that there's this giant sort of machine going on behind me that I can pretty much get whatever I need to help me perform and help me do my part to help the team win, which is what everybody wants. So, I mean, you've seen it at all levels over your career.
So I can imagine. And again, he was with us, and when I was coaching there with Gibby with the D-backs, and Joe, I can just imagine his face going, "What? You're there at 9:30? Are you kidding me?" I probably wasn't even out of bed yet. And
no.
Really, I mean, for a player, I mean, obviously they need the rest. You play the night games. Their schedules, depending on, you need to catch up. So, and I don't know exactly what Joe was doing. I know he had young kids, so maybe he was up. Fact is, he wasn't at the ballpark yet. I can tell you that.
Right.
And others. And again, that's the point that, people, hey, here's a major league player. He didn't realize what was going on at that particular time. So I probably didn't know that either back in my day when I was playing. But because I've done so many different, I've been in different areas in the game of baseball, I understand now, again, from the playing side, now up to more of the management side, that I get it and I understand, and really kind of how a whole organization is run. And it's something that I've enjoyed. Again, nothing's like playing. I mean, that's number one. If you ask me, what's the best thing you ever did? Well, playing. There's nothing like it. Coaching and all like that is good. Managing would be the next, just because you're caring about everybody on the team. If the hitting coach, you're worried about the hitters. The infield, you got your infield pitcher, you got a group. But the manager cares about each and every one of them. And you get a little adrenaline going more so than if you're another coach. But a player, you have something to do with the outcome. And the others, again, maybe a manager, sometimes, again, a Sparkyism is sometimes you got to know when you're playing well, back off. Don't, you can't push the ball, back off, let them go, let them play. Other times, you got to get that feel and, you've got to make some moves. But there's times that a good manager just knows when not to do something, just stay out of the way, so to speak. But again, playing was by far number one, and that's never going to change.
Yeah, sure. I can appreciate that. I can't relate, but I can appreciate it.
I'm going to tell you. I can tell you. I think we all feel the same way. But again, yeah.
So you talked about growing up San Diego, right?
Yeah.
You are definitely, if I had to, one of the words I would use to describe you is just a baseball rat. You are just, you live in it and breathe it. Did you play multiple sports as a kid growing up, or was it always
I
just
did. I
baseball?
mean, we played them all, but really, when I got into high school, it was basketball and baseball. And I really did enjoy basketball, to be honest with you. And I still, I mean, I'm again to this day, I mean, looking forward to the Super Bowl, college basketball, the March Madness is coming up. It's just something again, something that I know that I was, fortunately, it could be unfortunate, like for my wife says it's overbearing, but I've just from the day I can remember sports. I mean, I can remember when I was in the first grade and we're bringing in, we had sharing, and oftentimes the teacher would, let you bring in whatever you want. Sometimes you were assigned, sometimes they give you kind of a open forum, so to speak. I'd bring in the sports page and read about, the AAA San Diego Padres, or, back early on when, people are going to like, a lot of people aren't going to know this, but we had NBA basketball early on for 4 years. They were the San Diego Rockets. They were in San Diego before they went to Houston, but we
I
had
didn't
them for
realize
four
that.
years. So as a young kid, I'm bringing in things like that, and just reading these articles. And I can imagine these young kids like, the hell's this guy doing? That's the box scores in baseball, which is really how we followed baseball back in the day. We didn't have, all this. We had the game of the week on Saturday, which obviously was a huge deal. I was locked in. Um, it's just who I am, and I wish to a certain degree that I wasn't quite to that degree, but that's just who I am. And I've always been that way. Again, going back to a young age, and I made that comment about, I didn't know a lot of things. I was already starting that. And when you talk about a dream, I dreamt at night or in my backyard or out with my buddies about, becoming a Major League Baseball player. Or even at one point, I thought basketball might be, because in high school, again, people are following basketball more than the baseball team. And I was pretty good for a high school player. Let's get that straight. But and as you get older, the stories get better and better. I could say,
Oh, of
uh,
course, yeah.
yeah, that's how it works. But baseball was my passion, my first passion, and lo and behold, I got a chance to do it at the highest level. And I've still, since I signed out of high school, this is my 47th year coming up in professional baseball. 47. I've done nothing else other than I graduate from high school and go into professional baseball. And I said it before, I'm still a big little kid, but that keeps me young.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I remember, you and you were the bench coach, and I was sort of the assistant
Right.
GM, and we would spend time on the plane together on road trips and things like that. And everybody's got their own little routines when they get on the plane. Some guys just like to zonk out, others like to have a glass of wine or whatever it might be, or look over some advanced reporting. Every time I look over, you'd have the sports page out still. I mean, you were looking through the last night's NBA games or what's coming up the following week. And it was just, man, there was no off switch, which,
Yeah,
look, I
I'm
think it
guilty.
gets to, you were
Guilty as
fortunate
charged.
enough where yeah. But you were passionate about it from,
Yeah,
from first grade, if not before that.
yeah.
And
Well, even before
obviously
that, to be
talented
honest
enough
with
to
you.
make a life
Yeah,
out of it, right? And then
yeah.
not just a playing career, but a lifetime of it, 47
And I
years, right? It's
just again,
incredible.
just something that comes to mind. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just thinking. So, my parents, obviously, back in the day, education was huge. So going ahead now, I I signed out of high school. I was going to go to UCLA. I'd signed a letter of intent, and then I ended up signing. But before that, so education. I had two older sisters, and they were they were good students and all, and I was okay, not to their degree. Um, I think I was distracted. My mind was going other ways. But my parents, during the summer, because there's still free time. I'm out playing with my buddies, but there's still some downtime, and so they encouraged me, or basically told me that I needed to go to the library and I needed to start reading. They didn't tell me what I needed to read. And so I gravitated right to the autobiographies of sports. And I would read going back to Jim Thorpe or Jim Brown or Ty Cobb or Babe Ruth or any Bill Russell, all of them. And I started to do that, and I just loved it. And so, it's just something that, and just reading and I wish I was as good at memorizing math as I was like stats. It just came easy for me. I just would remember. Math, I wasn't quite that good, but it's
Well,
some things
probably
like
math in a
that and
baseball
names.
context, you were okay.
It worked for me. But again, going back to my parents, they encouraged me to read, and I did. And so I fell in love with that. And so I oftentimes, even during the year, but especially during the summer, I was reading autobiographies on all sports. And I was fascinated by it. Again, it kind of tells you a little bit more about when I was younger. It was just something that I I loved. And
Does one
it,
stick out to you?
well, to be honest with you, Babe Ruth. I have my favorite players, Roberto Clemente and Willie Mays, kind of during when I was first coming up. But Babe Ruth was. I mean, when you just read about what he accomplished. I just saw somebody tweeted me or text me a tweet because I'm not on the Twitter, but I get some of that stuff and some stats and some statistics and things. But they said that in 1930, Babe Ruth hadn't pitched in 9 years. All right. So he wanted to pitch. Apparently, he wanted to pitch the last game of the season. He hadn't pitched in 9 years. And through a complete game, he didn't give up 3 runs. He won. And he also hit and drove in his 153rd run, 1930. So, I mean, I didn't know that. So, somebody, stat guy, wanted to go back there and check it out. But he threw a game after not throwing for 9 years and threw a complete game. And you just think about, that's Otani,
It's
nowadays.
incredible. Yeah.
Um, but again, Babe Ruth was doing things. He was hitting more home runs than the entire teams for years. So,
Yep.
was it the same kind of baseball caliber? No, I will say that. But you got to give him his due. He was so far ahead of,
Yeah,
of
you can
years.
only play the cards you were dealt, right? You can't
Exactly,
fault him for that.
exactly. So he was a man against boys, and Babe Ruth was bigger than life for me.
No doubt. So you talked about getting drafted out of high school.
Right?
I imagine for you being the ultimate baseball rat, it was an easy decision for you at the time, or was there
It
some
was.
debate? Yeah, that's what I figured.
No, again, mentioning that I had signed a letter of intent, so I was accepted to go to UCLA, and to be honest with you, I'll be flat out. They were up and coming. USC was the dominant college baseball team in the country, but being out on the West Coast, UCLA was up and coming, and that was appealing. But one of the other parts that were appealing to me is that we talked earlier about John Wooden and being a basketball guy. And if you think back to the mid 70s, that was the end of John Wooden's era. So prior to that, as a young boy growing up, UCLA basketball was the king. I believe they won 10 championships in 12 years. There was no team like it, and John Wooden was the man. And
Hmm.
so that combination of going to UCLA to play baseball and being able to maybe help a newer program that wasn't SC. I loved SC as well, um, but UCLA basketball was that little caveat. I want to go there. But then the Tigers drafted me in the second round, and things were so different back then, Billy, about the coverage. Um, so I had no idea where I was going to get drafted. My high school coach had said, obviously I knew scouts were around, things like that. And there was interest. I didn't realize, where I was going to go. I didn't know if it was going to be the 20th round. Honestly, I did not. So I was going to go to UCLA and do my thing. But the Tigers drafted me in the second round. I'm like, oh, my first thought was they must like me. And so that really changed my mindset as far as, what? My dream was always to play professional baseball. And it didn't take much to convince my parents. They knew their son, you know, what I really wanted to do. And so it didn't take long. And lo and behold, I graduate in California. Graduate was late. It was like, gosh, it was like, I want to say it was like the 18th, 19th, 20th of June. And I signed, I graduated, and 2 days later I was off to Bristol, Virginia, which was a culture shock. Can't even say it, culture shock. Going from San Diego, who I'd never been past LA, and then going to a different part of the country it was green and rained and all. And I'm like, whoa. And then playing professional baseball was quite different. Even though I thought I was pretty good, and I had a really good senior year and all that good stuff. But professional baseball was eye opening right from the get go. But I was always able to adjust, quickly, probably quicker than most. But that's how it was. So I was going to go to UCLA. I got drafted in early June. There's a little process of talking to the Tigers, but I needed to graduate from high school first. And then that happened, and then whoop, I'm on an airplane, and I'm like, wow, this was quite different, going
Yeah.
into Bristol,
Well, you're talking about
Virginia,
like the
going to San Diego. Yeah.
right. Well, and the lack of, now
Oh yeah.
everything's out there.
No,
Everybody knows everything,
every
right?
step
But
of the way. There was, I
right.
honestly, again, I said there, I had no knowledge. Again, I got drafted, and another little part of this is that, so my parents didn't know as well. Um, so I sign, and they put me on a plane, and I take off. And little did I know that, they give you 3 days in a hotel. They put you up, and then you got to find a place to stay. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a second, I don't know anybody here. I've never been away from home. Who's going to cook? Who's going to do all that? I mean, I'm being dead serious.
Right.
So I got in with a college guy because at rookie ball at that particular time, we got guys coming out of college and then high
Hmm.
school. I fortunately hooked up with a young man from Loyola Marymount, and he was a senior, and so he had been away from home, and I was, thank goodness, Tom Henderson. Thank you, Tom. That you took me in, and he did the cooking, I did the dishes, and it was again. That's how it started. And then we're playing baseball every day, so it's like wow, quite different. But I want people to understand it. It was that was 1976, so that's a long time ago, and things have come for the better since then. But I mean, I'm telling you the honest to God truth of how this thing started. So I'm a pro, but I was like, whoa, this was quite different. I was expecting everything just to be kind of taken care of. Not the case.
Yeah,
Not the
again, it gets
case.
to all the people behind the scenes that are helping make
Right.
this
There you
operation
go.
run. But
There you
but
go.
I, I'm curious about your. Did you have expectations going into pro ball? Or did you just say, hey, I
Yeah.
want to play pro ball? And I'm curious if
Well,
how it compared to what your expectations were.
it's a good question, because really now, when you fast forward, it didn't take me long to get to the major league. So twofold, that I did well enough, but I was in the right place at the right time. We weren't winning, so they were looking for younger players, and I was part of that group that they promoted, kind of fast tracked. My expectations always, as an athlete, as you ask this question, is that I always believed in myself. I mean, if you don't believe in yourself, I mean, that's hard for any athlete that's listening. Obviously, you don't want to be so boastful, but you do have to believe in yourself. And I always believed that I was a good athlete, that I could catch the ball, and I was very accurate with my arm. I think I had good hand-eye coordination. Again, playing shortstop, being a point guard, I kind of felt they ran kind of hand in hand. But I did believe in myself. But I do, initially, again, I think one of the reasons why again, so I did expect to do well, but it was an eye-opening experience to play against kids from all over the country that were as good as you, if not better. So, what was the key to stay on top of your game, or at least to be somewhat successful? And I think what I figured out earlier and quicker than most is that just what I just described, the competition was so much better than high school. I mean, the pitching, obviously, so much better. So I didn't like making outs. And so I was like figuring like quickly, like, what do I do? Guys are shoving it, a little more than I was used to. And I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do? So my mind was already like, okay, I've got to play a little man game, which really was my game initially, anyways, because I was always, scrawny, shortstop, good athlete, but not very big and didn't weigh very much. But what was my best way to succeed? And so that's kind of what I figured out, and that's where the hand-eye coordination, putting the ball in play, hitting behind runners, popping one here and there. But I didn't do much popping early on, to be honest with you. I just was able to keep my head, so to speak, above. But it came from just the recognition is that what I was doing before, especially, younger age, and kind of, not saying dominating, but to that, level, higher level, That wasn't going to happen in pro ball. You know, you're not going to hit 500 or 400 like you did
How
in
long did it
high
take you to
school.
figure that out? Was that like immediate, or did it take you a
Yeah,
while?
I can't say it was immediate because it wasn't, but I got some breaks. And again, that things that if you think back to, I signed in June, third week of June. I'm playing professional baseball. They send me to Bristol, Virginia, and so I'm there until the first part of August, which is basically 6 weeks. I'm there, and I'm holding my own, and I'm doing kind of, I'm saying I'm adjusting to pro ball. All of a sudden, I get a call in from the manager from Bristol, Joe Lewis, and he tells me I'm being promoted to Montgomery, Alabama, which is double A, not A ball. I'm going from rookie ball and I'm 18 and I'm going to double A. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I didn't really know what to do. I was obviously I'm gonna go, but man, my mind, whew, it's like, wow, double A. And so I get there, and I'm playing now. When I first get there, I'm looking at grown men. And the first team that we played, I'll never forget this. We were playing at that time Chattanooga in the Southern League was the Oakland A's. So you're talking about the mid '70s, and Charlie Finley being there, was still there as the owner. And the big league clubs, because they were paying guys a couple $100 to grow a mustache, and the Raleigh Fingers and all those guys. So all those guys there in Double A, for the most part, they had beards and mustaches. And I'm like, again, I'm just right out of high school. I'm like, whoa, this was just kind of blowing my mind. So the shortstop for Double A, and the reason why they called me up is that they had an injury to the shortstop, and they were really, the second half of that season, they were in first place by a lot. So they figured, I think they could sneak this young kid in who I could catch the ball. That was my forte. I could catch the ball. I'm still perplexed at why they didn't call the A-ball manager. Right, not the manager. Jimmy Leland was the manager in Lakeland. I didn't call the A-ball shortstop. Why did they call me up from Double A? I still don't, but I'm glad they did. So I end up playing the last month of the season with the Double A Montgomery Rebels. The shortstop was only supposed to be out for a couple of weeks. He didn't heal up his back, whatever. I played. I didn't hit it all, but I played good defense, and we ended up winning the Double A championship with me, an 18-year-old shortstop. And actually, in the playoffs, I actually contributed with a couple of hits. But again, I was over my skis, but my name now jumped up the ladder. Okay.
Sure.
And, that's exactly. So I'm only a couple months out of high school. I'm already now in Double A and just won a championship in the Southern League with the Montgomery Rebels. So that was like, whoa. So I, again, just went from this to here. And that gave me some confidence, even though I didn't hit, but I was on a championship team. So again, winning, it helped. It gave me some extra confidence that I believed that, oh, I contributed to a championship team, even though I was only there, a little over a month. And then the next year, um, well, that right after that, I went to instructional league, 1976 to Florida. And back in those days, it was like a 45 game schedule. And we went from mid-September. So right after the Double A championship, I went home for a few days. We went back to Florida, met players that I had never met before, Lou Whitaker being one of them. And Jimmy Leland was the manager at Lakeland. I hadn't met Jim yet. He was one of our coaches in instructional league. They moved Lou, who was the MVP of the Florida State League in 1976 as a third baseman. We get to instructional league. He's just the MVP. They go, Lou, you're going to play second, and you're going to team up with this guy, me. And I think they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I'd say
He
so.
was small. He was skinny like me. He had a great arm, but I guess he didn't project as the prototype third baseman. And they moved him to second, and we played that year, the rest of the season, the 45 games. We went to Double A the next year as just to start the year, and we won the championship again. And Lou was the second baseman on the shortstop. Then they promoted us to the big leagues in September of '77. So a little over a year later, now we're both in the big leagues. And again, we did well in Double A that one year when we were there together. We did do very, very well, along with our whole team. Again, we played very well and won. But why did they promote us? Because the Tigers at the big league level weren't successful, and they were trying to incorporate younger players. And that's where Lou and I and Jack Morris and Lance Parrish and then Gibby and a few others later on ended up being part of our nucleus. But Lou and I and Jack and Lance were at the forefront of just being at the right place at the right time and then doing well as well. And that's, I guess, the recipe. So that's a lot in a short period of time. And again, to make your major league debut at 19 years old, that's unheard of. But I'm glad they did it. I'm glad that they fast tracked me, and you know what, it worked out. It worked out quite well for me.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it worked out.
Yep.
Yeah, I look back. I mean, you had about 750 minor league at bats
Yep.
before you got to the big leagues. Big leagues at 19, and
Right.
it's incredible. I mean, it really is, and it's incredible at face value. And then you look up and fast forward 20 years, you know, and you look back at how quickly you got there and how long you stayed and how at such a high level you played at. It's pretty amazing. But I was always curious, like, you can't talk about Alan Trammell without Lou Whitaker and vice versa, right? I mean,
No, you can't.
it is incredible.
We're linked together.
Yeah, and I know you guys are good friends and obviously have tons of history. I'm curious you said it was Instructor League you guys met for the first time?
Yes. Yes.
So did you guys hit it off right away,
Yes.
or did it take some? You did.
No, we did. I mean, again,
okay.
You know what? I'm on a campaign, and I've been doing this for a while, and I do it in my own way about, you know, the Hall of Fame, which I feel so fortunate that I'm part of that. And but Lou Whitaker should be with me, and so that's that campaign about doing whatever I can. And I know it's going to happen. I just wish it was sooner than later. But to your question about teaming up and did we hit it off right off? Yeah, we did. Honestly, we did. That's because he's a talented player. He could play. And he took, I know that deep down, and he's made some comments. We've talked about this a little bit over the years about but initially when again, MVP of the league, all right? He's 19. We're a year apart, okay? And then within a week, they switch him to second. I'm like, if that would have happened to me, I think I might have said something. I might have been like, well, what did I do wrong? Come on. I mean,
right.
You know, what the heck?
Yeah.
Give me a shot. I mean, but they were envisioning, you know, the future. And so to their credit, you know, tough decisions. And I'm sure Lou, you know, underneath it, our personalities are different. We were taught the same way, and we knew, you know, that's how that was. But again, we're all different. And
did he ever bristle at that or reveal it to you sort of in private that he was frustrated with it?
He did not. He did not.
It's amazing.
Honestly, he didn't. He did it, but he was again more quiet. And I'm sure he had those thoughts, but I never. I was like, hey, we were just playing, which is what we did for so many years until later on when we decided, you know, we talked about staying with the Tigers, you know, our whole career. But prior to that, you know, we were just trying to get to the big leagues. And I think maybe in his own way, he realized that maybe that was the best, the quickest route for him. But again, and I say he was quiet. And I mentioned about you got to believe in yourself. Lou Whitaker believed in himself. He didn't like to talk about himself, but obviously we knew him behind the scenes and all of our joking between each other and things like that. He was very confident about what he did. And the one thing that always stuck out to me initially about Lou is that I was always taught, you know, as a young player, and you know, going back to Little League, that with 2 strikes, I would, you know, didn't want to get called out on strike 3, tried to minimize those kinds of things. So I would expand the zone a little bit, you know, and try to put the ball in play, that kind of thing. Lou always had that ability to take a pitch off the plate like that. And I'm like, damn, how does he do that? Well, that's a God-given talent. It really is. But he always, from the first day I ever met him, he had the ability to take close pitches. And he was loose with the hands, quick wrist, and it was just who Lou was, and had a cannon for an arm. So when they moved him to second, it was really an advantage for him and for us, to be honest with you. But no, he never complained. He kept a lot of things in, but he worked his tail off. Again, we were taught the same way from Jimmy Leland back in the day to the other minor league instructors to then again when we got to the big leagues. Ralph Houck was our first major league manager, and then Sparky came in shortly thereafter. And again, Lou was we were the double play combination really from the get go. And I ended up playing one more year after that. Lou retired with Sparky, but Sparky, Lou, and I were together for 17 years. And
It's incredible.
Like I said, he's a Hall of Famer. When he retired in 1995, at the end of that year, he was in the top 5 of all-time second basemen. And people don't, I don't know why he doesn't get the love. He just kind of gets overlooked. If you look at his numbers and you compare him to, at that time, the best second basemen of all time, he ranks right up there. But again, people don't recognize or hear his name enough. So, like I said, I'm in there. If I'm in there, Lou Whitaker should be in there as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. And the 17 years together between you, Lou, and Sparky's incredible. I mean, we'll never see, a double play combination together for 19 years.
Hope not, but you never say never. But it's
I don't know. There's so much has changed, right? I mean, and I'm curious. Did you guys appreciate it at some point while it was happening? You're like this longevity, this sort of friendship and this bond.
It took a long time because both. I think both. Well, in fact, I know because Lou and I we've talked about this later. But we were just playing. We're just doing our job and doing what we love to do because he loved to play baseball. I mean, honestly, his passion is like mine. He might not verbalize it like I do, but he loves baseball, no doubt about it. When we talk, it's always he knows all about what's going on in the world of baseball, and he just going back to our time, we're doing our job. And then as we got older, we realized that, recognition, we've been together longer than most. And then all of a sudden, we broke a record. And then we ended up playing 19 years together, which is not even close. Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins have 12, and we have 19. And, guys like Davey Concepcion and Joe Morgan, arguably, great baseball players. They were like 9. Billy Russell and Davey Lopes around 9. So tandems that people think they're not even close to how long that Lou and I played together.
Yeah.
So the fact that you can imagine a double play combination, which I think are pretty important, on a baseball field, they're all important, but middle of the field, that Lou and I had a little bit of an advantage over people from the years that we practiced together, knowing our timing, things like that. Plus, he was a darn good baseball player, very talented, and he could hit too. I mean, he was a much better hitter initially than I was, and I developed a little bit more. But Lou was always further ahead as far as the hitting was for me. There's no question. And he was the Rookie of the Year in 1978. I know people don't realize that he was the Rookie of the Year. I mean, again, that's a fact. Check the book.
Right.
But then, as I think I mentioned about later, and I don't know exactly what year it was, but we were like, okay, you look on the back of your baseball card, Lou Whitaker says Detroit Tigers, Alan Trammell, Detroit Tigers. That's pretty cool, pretty special. And I know it doesn't happen that often, but the fact that we both did it, and we started talking about it a little bit, and obviously it's got to work 2 ways with the management. You got to sign a contract. That we were both able to do that. And, we were recognized, and people say, well, you might have got short. I don't believe that at all. As far as the contract, we were taken care of. And I'm proud to have worn that old English D for all those years. And I'm speaking for Lou as well. He feels the same way. I mean, again, back of our baseball cards, Detroit Tigers. Look at the double play combination.
It's a pretty lengthy back of the baseball card.
Yeah,
for both of you.
It
It's
We're
incredible.
both proud of that. Yeah, very.
Rightfully so. And I'm kick myself that I didn't know this at the time when you and I spent so much time together. But the cameo you guys made at Magnum P.I, I didn't know about this.
Wait, I'm looking around and I'm playing around, but I still get residuals for that. And so does Lou.
That's
now,
amazing.
They're not very big. They're just dollars. I laugh. It's jokes. So we had to join the Screen Actors Guild to get it, to do this. And I paid my dues for years, and I dropped out. And then I still
Right.
getting the checks. I'm like, what's going on here? And I called and they said, yeah, you still get the residuals as long as they're running them. So, the story about Magnum P.I. and Tom Selleck. Tom Selleck used to come around as he's a good athlete, to be honest with you. And so he used to like to come around. His I think his grandparents, some family member grew up in Toledo, and Toledo being an hour from Detroit, were
Sure.
Tiger fans, and used to always wear the old English tee,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's what he did on the show. And so
Right.
um, there was a phone call made out to the director, whatever, and a guy, mentioned to me, he says, we put this request in, and I'm like, joke, I'm thinking it's a joke, they're gonna blow this off. They go, no, we'd love to have Lou and Tram on. So 1983, when the season was over, we flew out there, and we spent a couple of days with Tom, and we had met Tom before. Again, he had popped into Detroit occasionally for a few years, and we did a show. We both had 3 lines apiece, so we were brutal, and but we did it, and they did this little skit, and so yeah, we were on Magnum P.I. Both Lou and I had 3 lines apiece, and it was like 30 seconds.
Oh, that's
And
amazing. So
but I still
good.
get those huge checks from the Screen Actors Guild.
Well, if nothing else, you just it's a fun reminder. You get the $1.50 check in the mail, and it's like, all
Oh
right, it's
my
right.
gosh. Yeah, it's a little bit more than that. Twice a year they send it.
Yeah,
It's incredible. I just smile every time I see it. It's like, wow, this is worth it.
that's
The paper
great.
and the stamp and all that to do all the paperwork. But nevertheless, it does bring back a good memory. And they filmed it over in Honolulu on Diamond Head.
Oh,
So
that's not
we
bad.
were able to go over there and spend a few days in Hawaii and be with this the group. And but Tom was big at that particular time, and he's still big.
Sure,
He's
sure.
still big, and you know what I'll think back very fondly on that because we did it. People joke around as I do, and like I said, I'll use this line. I've used this like when I'm playing golf. Don't quit your day job. So
Yeah, I think you made the right choice. I think you made the
yeah,
right choice. But
absolutely.
it
It was
it
fun.
it brings us to another a favorite moment of your career, of mine. And there's a lot, you're involved in a lot of iconic moments, and there's a lot of iconic photos of you. There's one in particular that I like that I want to show you right now.
They pushed
Can
it
you
over.
see that?
Oh, I can. That's Prince Fielder. I mean, well,
Yeah.
that's Prince Fielder, Cecil's son. At the
Yep.
time, we're in that's Toronto, and so he obviously had the vision and the dream about following in Dad's footsteps, which he did.
Yep.
And as you can, Prince was always a big kid. Let's put it that
Right.
way.
Yeah.
And but the, he would come to Tiger Stadium, and at 12 years old, I'm not exactly sure what year that is, and what his age was, but he actually at the short porch in right field in Tiger Stadium, which was down the line, was 325. So you're talking about a 12-year-old. That's pretty impressive.
Did he really?
He had great
Wow.
hand-eye coordination, and just like his dad, Cecil, was a tremendous basketball player growing up on the West Coast. Prince had athleticism, and even though he might have been a little bit bigger, he had great footwork. You can look
Yeah.
at the technique in the arm. You can just tell that,
Yeah.
that there's an athlete there, and that's
Yeah.
that's that's not a normal throwing position. He knows exactly what he's doing,
Yeah.
and I'm sure Sess and others helped him, but he had some natural talent that came from Dad, and
Oh, there's no doubt.
his mom and Dad. But well, obviously Sess being a teammate of mine, and really, what a great guy. Cecil was one of my favorite teammates in my time with the Tigers.
I just love the. Yeah, I mean, I've always appreciated Prince's athleticism because he's
Yeah,
obviously.
look at the Zubaz too. The Zubaz, those
Oh, I
pants.
mean, he's got the ratty Jordans going. He's got the Zubaz pants, the giant, Cubs Zubaz
Oh
pants,
man,
the giant Zubaz shirt. It's like that would be me if I was his age and my dad was a big league player.
I'm looking.
It's
So
amazing.
look, if people want to look at that, but look at his grip. He's got a 4-seam grip.
Oh, I
in.
know it's all right.
He's got the four seam grip, which is how, when you're teaching young baseball
Yeah.
players, they need to learn how to do that initially. And when you can get them and you practice that, it's going to help your accuracy when you're throwing, regardless of what position you play. So there's a lot of good stuff, but that's great form.
I just love your facial expression in the background. You're just kind of taking it
I'm
all
paying
in. You're like,
attention.
man,
I'm watching, going, you know what? He's got a chance, and
he's gonna be okay. Yeah.
he had a nice career for sure.
Yeah, he sure did.
And a very nice young man himself. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were obviously, wired for the game. You were passionate about it. You're obviously talented. Have a Hall of Fame career. It's over, and then you transition to the coaching side of it, right? You coach and manage in the big leagues. I'm curious if it's sort of a strange question because obviously being a former player, you have the credibility and you can relate to the struggles and the things that players deal with every day. But being such a good player, I'm curious, did that make things easier for you or more difficult? Because I imagine some things that you were able to do in your career may have come a little bit easier to you than they do to others. So there's a difference between those who can do it and those who can teach it, right? There's a lot of great coaches and managers that never play the game.
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
That's a good question, Billy, and just trying to be honest that I enjoy, first of all, I'm most comfortable on a baseball field. That's where I'm the most comfortable, other than being at home with a family, on a baseball field. But the way my mind, and you mentioned wired, and again, now that I'm older and I reflect on certain things, things that might have come a little easier for myself. And when I'm teaching, which I'm still going to have to teach, and hopefully they can apply it. And so that's the catch-22 thing is that. But to answer the question, sometimes it gets a little frustrated. But on the other side is that I know after doing this for so long, I can't do it for them. So all we can do as instructors is give them the information and encourage them, and be there as a sounding board. But at the end of the day, they have to apply it. So like a pitcher, they throw on the side and they dot the I's on the corners, and all of a sudden they can't do it in the game. Or a hitter, you watch them take batting practice, they're just bombing balls left and right, shooting the ball all over the field, and in the game they can't do the same thing. That happens, and a lot of it has to do with internally and emotions and being able to channel. We all get nervous. Don't get me wrong. That every athlete that's ever played has felt that anxiety, but the good ones are able to use that, the adrenaline, and they're able to they can slow things down and channel that and perform. That's what good ones can do. But there's feeling. I mean, they're human beings. So don't ever kid yourself that even Michael Jordan or LeBron or Mike Trout or Mookie, any of these guys don't feel some of those emotions. They do, but again, they're able to channel that better than some of the others. So to get back kind of what you were talking about is that I'm fine with that. I enjoy the teaching part. I really do. And I guess I'm past the point where I live and die with them too because I care. But I do know at the end of the day that it's on you, young man. And so, unfortunately, they have a draft every year, Billy, that you're aware of, and new players come in, and they do this in every sport. You know what that means when, and I'm just being honest. So, new players come in every year in every sport. And what happens to other guys that have been around for a while to make a spot for them? They have to go home.
Mm-hmm.
They have to find a new profession, or they have to go to another team first. But again, I'm being honest. I'm not trying to be just telling you the facts. That's how it works. So this year, there's going to be new players coming in, and unfortunately, kind of what we talked about here, or talking about some of the players, it's not going to work out for them. I don't know who, and again, I wish every one of them the success that I was able to, experience, live that life. But it's not going to happen for everybody. And so, again, I love teaching. I love being out there with them. And I think I've changed a little bit over the years in regards to that, just because again, with the age, things just change you to a certain degree. So, and I'm okay with that. I really am.
Yeah. One of the guys that has a well-earned reputation for being somebody who rises to those moments that you talk about, that does control the emotions, is I know a good friend of yours, right? Kirk Gibson,
Yeah.
has built a legacy on big moments, right? Some of the most iconic moments in the history of the game. And I sort of fast forwarding from his playing career to our time together in Arizona, and Gibby was the manager, you were the bench coach, and you get hired in baseball to get fired, right? That's the way it goes. And I don't know if I ever told you this at the time, but Gibby got let go as the manager, and there were still, I think there were 3 games left in the season. I think it was the last homestand, and you were asked to take over as the interim manager for one of your best friends. And I imagine it was an incredibly difficult position for you to be in, and maybe a decision to make at the time. I don't want to speak for you, but wasn't surprised, but was impressed by the fact that, you handled yourself with incredible integrity, and, managed the last 3 games for the betterment of the organization, despite it, I'm sure, hurting you personally as well, given that Gibby was such a good friend.
Well, that is true. That is a true story. And so going back to kind of the thought behind that is that, yeah, it hurt. And of course, my good friend Gibby, who, my God, never met anybody like him. And I mean that in a complimentary way. This is a man's man. There's nobody like him that I've ever met, when I was playing with him, now today that I'm still around the game. But one of my teaching methods was when I talk to players about how do you know how to play a full season. And so until you've played 162, we can try to help you through that, but you're going to have to figure it out, some of that yourself. It's just part of the deal. No, there's no other baseball league that you play as many games as you do at a professional level in the major leagues. So we're going to help you, and I'm going to try to encourage you about certain things to try to help you get through it. But you're going to have to figure it out. Once you've done it, wow, that's a huge stepping stone. So again, getting back to my method is that we were taught, again, from Sparky, that you play the first game and you all the way to the end. First game and the last game, they count in the standings. Now, again, the standings might be different, but that's a professional. That's a professional baseball player. That's what you're paid. Okay, if you don't like what you're doing, and the record says that you're not going to win it this year, okay, stop playing, but you don't get paid after that. Well, that's not going to happen, obviously. No, your job is to play. I know it might be a little tougher, but you have to learn. That's what you do. So going back to 2014, that I preached that, and then there isn't anybody around or alive, if I'm not mistaken. Well, there might be a few people alive, but going back to the Mets in the early 60s, 62, when they lost all their games, and then they lost 120, we lost 119 games in 2003 when I was the manager. So my name's on that. And we made it through it. And actually, we just weren't very good, but we did a lot of things right that we were developing, at that particular time. So again, now going back to that same spill, that's what we were teaching them. Every day, you show up. You're a professional. I don't care. Last day of the season. So that was it's like I'd already talked to a lot of these guys about that same thing. So for me to kind of quit and go out, even though I at that particular time, nobody would have said a thing or a word, but I just felt strongly my beliefs that I'm going to go all the way to the end, and then when it's over on Sunday, I'll go home and we'll reevaluate things. But that's Billy. That's what I did.
Well, it's a testament to you. Obviously, it's also a pretty good indicator that I know Sparky had a huge influence on you and Gibby, and obviously your parents and the way you were raised. But
sure.
Yeah, I mean, you've always been the lead by example type, and just kind of I touched on it earlier. Your energy, your the ability to just be present, I think, has always resonated with me, and I know it does with players. And yeah, going back to that Tigers year, right? Like I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys lost 119, But you were sniffing 120 for the last handful of games, right? And you guys went on a little bit of a hot streak to avoid it. Is that right?
The last week, and yeah, it was really the whole year as far as the losing and all. I mean, again, we weren't we weren't very good, and I just got to throw in a couple little things. So we carried 3 Rule 5 pitchers the whole year. The whole year we
Yeah.
did, and but again, that tells you where we were at. We were cleaning house. Dave Dombrowski was the GM president, and I believe it. He knew what he was doing, but we had to kind of suck it up, so to speak. But we had to start over, and we did a lot of things that we knew that initially it wasn't going to be successful wins and losses, but we were going to try behind the scenes develop some guys, which we ended up doing. To be honest with
Mm-hmm.
you, I give our staff a hell of a lot of credit with that. They were on board along with myself. So we did. We got a little hot at the end, and we were able to. Gosh, the Saturday game that would have, kind of tied the record. Um, we were down to Minnesota, and I thank Ron Gardenhire because he ended up being a Tiger manager later, and we had a
Sure.
chance to talk. He took a lot of his guys out, sixth, seventh inning, started taking guys out. They had like a seven, I want to say it was 7-0 at one point, but 7-2. We ended up coming back and winning the game. And I thanked him, later on. Thanks for taking, and he was just doing what he felt was best because they were going into playoffs, get ready
Mm-hmm.
for postseason for them. But again, nobody likes to have that, and nobody had really talked about a record and a dubious one of being, one of the worst teams in baseball history. Um, but we didn't. It didn't happen. Now we had a terrible record, but we didn't get as many losses as the New York Mets, which I'm
Right.
glad about that. But you know what? Even if I'm still living, I'm still kicking, and I'm still doing my thing, and I still love the game. And we were 43 and 119. Not very good.
Tram,
That's a lot. That's a lot. Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. It's a lot of losses,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
pretty impressive. I mean, you talked earlier about
Yeah.
the ability to finish a 162 game season
Exactly.
and see something through to the
Yeah.
end, and you're losing that much. I mean,
Right.
I don't think people can really appreciate how hard that is. Probably more so for a coaching staff than even the
Well, it
players.
was. Yeah.
To just keep soldiering through that
Yeah.
and stay focused. And look,
We
you and your
made it.
staff,
We
obviously,
did
yeah,
it. And we
you
preached
made
that.
it, and
We preached that.
your record aside, right? You finished winning some games, which you
Yep.
obviously didn't win many of that year. So
Right.
whether it was fear of losing or that never entered the conversation or not, like the fact that you're on a team that lacked that much talent, that was that bad, but you were still able to get them to play through the finish line. That's pretty good.
Well, it is. And then now let's fast forward. So that was 2003. And in 2006, when they let me go after the 5 season, they brought in Jim Leland. Again, now going back full circle from Jim Leland
Right.
into the Tigers. He had been managing, was there very successful. He became the manager. I know that was a dream of his, and he was so appreciative and said so many complimentary things about myself and my staff because, oh yeah, they did. Mr. Illich, they went out and they brought in a few other players, but there was quite a few of those players that were with us in '03. So in
Sure.
3 years, they went to the World Series. They lost to the Cardinals, but
Mhm.
that's pretty go for 119 losses to 3 years later going and representing the American League in the World Series. And so I guess my point with that is that for other people and other teams, it can happen, and it can happen. It can turn around fairly quickly with a lot of hard work and all the things that we've talked about on the podcast. But again, our staff, we did some things right. Obviously, that one year that my name's on there, and it's okay. I can live with it, and it's okay. I mean, it is.
I
what
don't. I
it
don't
is.
think that's the top of the list of things that your name's attached to that people really focus
Well,
on. So
again,
I think you're
it
okay.
would be, but so many great things that have happened. And then from that time on, from '06 and through a good 10 years, the Tigers, unfortunately, never won a World Series. They lost. They got, ambushed by in 12 by the Giants, who, you know, um, unfortunately, and again, I'm going to make my comments, and it's sour grapes, but it is what it is as well. But the Tigers kind of boat raced everybody through the playoffs, and they sat around and waited a week. And I don't think any team, if you had your druthers, you don't want that much time off. And so
Right.
they were trying to simulate and do whatever they could. And the first game in game one in 12, Pablo Sandoval, who was a darn good baseball player, hit 3 home runs. And you go up
Hmm.
against somebody like that that gets hot in a short series like that. That's the kind of stuff that somebody wins with, or you, on the other side, you lose. And they
Yep.
beat the Tigers. And so, unfortunately, they didn't win, but they were arguably, if not the best team, but for 10 years, they were right up there and had
Oh, they were
some
stacked.
really, really good
Yeah.
players. None other than this top of the list would be, Justin Verlander and Miguel Cabrera, two Hall of
Yeah. Pretty
Famers
good
that I
ones.
hope will go in as Tigers when their day
I
comes.
would I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so. But yeah, one thing that I think is widely applicable from sports that you can apply to business or life is the idea of of the building something and sort of the tearing down and rebuild that you had to deal with, right? You talked about the losses and all
Right.
that, and then quick turnaround, and they're in the World Series 3 years later. So those are two different skill sets, right? We saw it in it was Chicago. Was it Rick Renteria? Got let go and was through the rebuild, and
Yeah.
I believe it was Joe Madden came in, and so we've seen,
Yeah.
um,
True.
in the past where there's the building, whether it's a startup and you're trying to get things off the ground versus when you're kind of humming along and ready, but you can't have the former without the latter, right? You can't just snap your fingers and get through that pain sometimes, and um, I'm sure that Jim
And you
Leland and
don't
all
have
the
a
other.
drawer with that magic dust that you can just touch somebody and it's happening. No, that's not how it works. No.
Yep. Yeah, you got to go through the pain, and everybody that's in there with you knows that and appreciates your contributions. Wins
The
and losses aside.
sacrifices,
And
again,
so,
going back to kind of the start of the podcast, is that I think I mentioned about the sacrifices and discipline. And again, it goes back to that same thing without, we all want to win. But a lot of people want it, well, they want to win if it falls in their lap. Well, it doesn't work that way. So there's going to be sacrifice. There's going to be some down days. There's going to be some dark moments. But then that makes the beauty when you do win and the sacrificing all worth it. But some people, again, they just, they'll say it. Everybody says, I want to win. I want to win. Yeah, we all want to win. But do you really want to win? Are you willing to sacrifice and get down and dirty and go through some of those moments? That's what happens. And nobody just cruises like it just everything, no bumps along the way. Come on, that's not how life works.
well, guys like you, the guys that wind up in the Hall of Fame, the guys that do just incredibly special things, I feel like they probably not just are willing to do the work, they embrace it. They know that it's part of it, and they view it as like part and parcel. Like, if I'm going to raise that trophy at the end of the year, I know this is what, it's not even necessarily what I have to do. I kind of want to do it, right? Because that's how we get there, and I want to get there.
Well said. Embrace it exactly. And I know that's how it works. Again, not just in baseball, but in all walks of life. And just makes it special. I just wish, I'm jealous. Like Gibby got to win one with us, and he, did the incredible moment with the Dodgers. The walking off that we all. He's gonna that clip is gonna be forever, which
Yep.
is deservingly so. He had that moment. He thrived on those things. Jack Morris won 4 after he left us, and then he won with the Twins with the 1 year he was there, and he won back to back with Toronto. I tease him like I'm jealous. I'm jealous, but you know what? I know what they did. They were good and they worked, and that's how it works. It's again just not given to you just because you're a nice guy or whatever. You know what? It doesn't work that way. It's not how it works. So you know what? Again, embrace it and get after it, and there's your teaching moment for the fans out there. That I'm going to tell you that it's just not going to fall in your lap. It's not going to happen that way.
Yeah. Amen. Well, you're definitely one of the nice guys, Tram, and I appreciate you taking the time. I mean, really, you look back on your career, and it's almost hard to believe some of the stars aligning between you and Lou and Sparky, or you going to the Hall of Fame with Jack Morris, and
Right.
just all of it. It's almost like this romantic baseball story when you look back on it, and it's It's just been a lot of fun to hear your side of it. And I know there's a lot to learn, not just in baseball, but sports and life in general from kind of your journey. And I appreciate you sharing it with us.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Billy. Again, I know that we're doing this from afar, but I'd love to catch up and reminisce a little bit more and tell some more baseball stories, because with me, that's what you're going to get. But yeah, it's been a great ride. And again, I say it again about, this game keeps me young at heart. Hopefully, again, the energy I have a few more years left. Back with the Tigers, as far as our rebuilding year, we got some work to do. So that'll keep me young for a little while as well. But again, thank you for having me. I hope that this enlightens some fans, and look forward to doing it again sometime.
Absolutely. Well, the game's better off with you, Tram. I know that, so I appreciate you.
All right, Bill. You take care. Thank you.
All right, you too. Thanks for listening to this episode of the No One Is Watching podcast. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe so you can be notified when a new episode drops. If you're interested in similar content, you can check us out at nooneiswatching.com or find us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. See you next time.